You gonna need help?
Yeah, SOS.
Matt must have been reached over.
Oh, yeah. Do you need help?
Yes, you're live. We want you to sing the national anthem.
I'll sing it for you.
Okay, go for it.
Actually, I have a little bit of cold.
See the Sox
Spring.
game last night?
Yes, not all of it. I fell asleep.
Yeah. Too late.
I saw when they were ahead enough. But I'm
Nice forum here today.
Yeah, where is everybody?
I wish.
We got cable back
wish they'd be
right
on
after
early.
it started.
Oh, it's
Did
the
you?
whole thing is
We were
the
out
whole
at
series is
8:09
on
when
it,
it
like
came
8
back.
something at night. It's exhausting.
Just
The
barely.
national anthem.
World
Oh,
Series.
At first,
It's on too late.
Yeah, it's 8:10.
Made it to this, I didn't see that big home run last night.
I think
I went
unless
to
I
about-
dropped it, I don't remember because I had it on while I was sleeping. So I'm like, half
I
listening.
went up to about the sixth
Oh,
inning.
the veteran?
I think I must have seen it.
You know, I thought when I was retired, this is great, now I don't have to worry about
Oh,
getting up. I still can't make it through the whole game.
That's all right.
I still can't. I'm like, hey, I don't have to get up tomorrow, I'm gonna watch the whole thing, and this hasn't happened yet.
Wait till if we go to UNH.
Yeah. I wish it was like 6 o'clock, because even if you get home from work late, you're just missing the beginning, you still see the end of it.
And now being 3 o'clock, we'll commence the meeting, the October 24th meeting of the Laconia Police Commission. Would you please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Recording Secretary, Lori A. Marsh is here. Roll call, Commissioner Tar,
Here?
Commissioner Mello,
Here.
Commissioner Whittam. We therefore are all present and we have a quorum. I'd like to recognize the staff present, Chief Matthew J. Canfield, Lieutenant Kevin Butler, and we have and Prosecutor James Sawyer. We have a quorum, so let's begin. Moving on to personnel matters, commendations and awards. Chief
Nothing.
Canfield, nothing? Training.
Nothing?
Under orders and bulletins, Laconia Links, Chief Canfield.
Nothing for Laconia Links.
Resignations and retirements, Chief Canfield.
Nothing?
Hirings, Chief Canfield.
Hiring, so the backgrounds have been completed. Offers of employment have been given out to 5 candidates, which will bring us a little bit beyond full staff. So we'll replace our 3 open positions and then 2 anticipated vacancies, making us full staffed. They've been given a November 16th start date. So the plan is to have them start, go through the in-house academy, and go to the police academy starting in January. Last I knew, 3 out of the 5 had been accepted into the academy already, so we anticipate the other 2 will be accepted and be done by the end of April.
There were no transfer candidates, right? Already certified candidates in this?
There were
group?
not. I can speak on these 5 candidates that we hired are probably the best I've seen in probably 3 years anyway. Very, very good quality applicants, very clean backgrounds. There were no issues at all, so it was very refreshing to see because we haven't seen this in a long time.
Orders and bulletins.
So with the transfer of, or the promotion of Rich Carlson to sergeant in the patrol, there was a process that was conducted, and Sergeant Ben Black was selected to be transferred into detectives as the detective sergeant. So that was effective as of October 9th, and you'll see that as the order that's in the packet.
He was a sergeant already, wasn't he, Chief?
He was.
Yeah. So it's just a different unit assignment?
Yeah, you know, I mean, certainly, you know, he's been in patrol for, gosh, I don't know, 3 years probably as a sergeant. This opportunity came up in detectives and certainly sees a different side of the house, and I think Lieutenant Butler can speak to it, but his eyes are pretty wide open as far as the diversity and difference in police work.
Yeah, he's been, excuse me, he's been somewhat surprised at how much BCI actually does, which is good. And he can bring that back. If he goes back to patrol, he'll bring it back. Same as temporary duty assignments. They leave detectives with a lot more knowledge, makes them a better patrolman, and gives them a better insight into what actually happens behind the scenes that they may not see.
Does the department have a formal cross-training policy, chief, where different people at different levels can move around to get exposure to the different units, or is it only when there's an opening or a vacancy?
It's when there's an opening or a vacancy, with the exception of detectives. 2 years ago, we started, one of the positions in detectives, we started as a temporary duty assignment.
Yeah.
So it runs from September to June, with the idea of a new person in there every single year. And then they're back out in the summertime to support patrol.
What's the length of this assignment?
His is a permanent assignment as a detective sergeant. So there is no termination point for him.
Division Bureau Commanders Forum. Anything on that, chief?
Speak for the captain, who was supposed to be here. He had a last-minute meeting that came up that he had to be at. So he gave me a couple things to talk about. The first was Pumpkin Fest. Pumpkin Fest was very well attended. Good crowds and very little issues as far as police were involved. Budget is on track. We're at 25% of the way through the budget year, and our budget is at 24.217% of actual spent, so we're slightly below where we should be at, so that's a good sign. And then he's been working on putting together the 2019-2020 budget, which will be due sometime in the beginning of December.
So I noticed there was a notation on the retirement payout to now retired Lieutenant Sweat. Does that incorporate unused vacation and sick leave? Is that what,
It does.
are there any other elements to that payout?
It includes his current vacation time, comp time that he had built up, vacation time, longevity days, or any time that he had on the books. Certainly, he was grandfathered in 2014. We changed the policy so only half of the sick time can be used
Yeah.
as a payout, but he was grandfathered
Yeah.
prior to that.
That was my next question. I didn't know when you would change the policy on that.
Yep.
Anything under operations for Lieutenant Simmons? Anything under support division?
They're conducting the fall firearms training, which tonight's the last session of it. They've been incorporating some tactical training with it, as well as firearms training, all on the range. So from what I've heard, the training has gone very well, so. And then he's been working on several of the grants as well, so he's been staying pretty busy.
Investigations, Lieutenant Butler.
It's been busy as always. There has been a lot of training with all these new people, so Tony's heavily involved in the firearms, so he's pretty much took lead as firearms instructor, so he's switching his schedule around, working around his regular job as well. Ben is doing very, very well. He's a joy to work with. He's personality-wise, he wants to learn everything he can, which is awesome. It's given me a little spark too,
Nice.
being able to show somebody.
And he's a Laconian boy, a Laconian man too, right?
Yeah, he lives in Laconia, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Long time, good. Legal. Prosecutor, sorry.
Just a few things on the Victim Services Unit. There's been a couple inquiries about volunteer. What's people wanting to volunteer? Chief forwarded me an email from somebody, and I made left a message for that person, so hopefully that will come to fruition, and we'll have another very capable volunteer. Another young person who recently located to Laconia to get some help with services due to his addiction, expressed an interest in volunteering. And I didn't think it was we had a great conversation. I think it was appropriate given his recent sobriety. But he is a very capable person who has been struggling with addiction. And I put him in touch with a variety of people, including Eric Adams, might be able to use him for navigating recovery or one of his programs. But it's good to see. And I've had a couple other calls. Another gentleman who's in longer-term recovery contacted me asking to volunteer in the Victim Services Unit. And he was only going to be here for 9 months or so in a sober house. And I don't think that was using resources in terms of training to get him up to speed. I didn't think it was a good match, but it was nice to have people looking at the PD for volunteer opportunities.
Moving on to commission action. You've all had a chance to review the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion?
I move that we accept the minutes of the September 19, 2018 meeting.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On a motion made by Commissioner Tarr, seconded by Commissioner Mello, passed unanimously. The meeting minutes of September 19th were accepted as distributed. Out-of-state school.
So there is one request in this category. It's for the Special Olympics International Conference for Officer Rick Bassett. Rick Bassett heads up our connection with Special Olympics. He coordinates a number of different fundraisers and events for this program, including Fuel and Dreams, the Law Enforcement Torch Run, the Winter Special Olympics at Waterville Valley in the wintertime, as well as the Summer Games at UNH. He contributes a lot of his own time volunteering for this program. It's a very special program to us, and certainly the interaction with these people is very rewarding. I think more so for us than it is probably for them, because it's just a tremendous experience. So he's put a lot of time into it. He was asked by the Special Olympics Committee to attend the international conference in Las Vegas, which is totally paid for by Special Olympics of New Hampshire. So that's what the request would be, that's to allow him to attend this school at no cost, other than to cover some of his time traveling there.
Is there a motion to approve the attendance of Officer Bassett at the Special Olympics
I'll move that we,
International Convention?
I'll move that we approve the request for out-of-state travel for the Special Olympics Conference.
Is there a second?
I second.
Discussion. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consider it done. Department monthly highlights, Chief Canfield.
So for the month of September, we responded to a total of 1,767 calls for service, investigated 384 incidents, and cleared 198 criminal offenses by arrest, making 125 total physical arrests, which is up slightly. Conducted 250 motor vehicle stops, issued 21 motor vehicle summonses, 112 written warnings. We had 0 fatalities for motor vehicle accidents, covered a total of 49 other motor vehicle accidents, 14 of which had injuries, 22 parking tickets on DWI, and 39 people were taken into protective custody for intoxication. We responded to 41 total domestic disturbance calls, 126 other disturbances, 7 suicidal subjects, and investigated 13 violations of restraining orders. There were 12 volunteer hours from LPD members, 20.75 volunteer hours for our Victim Services Unit, serving a total of 24 victims. If you'll notice that the motor vehicle stops are down considerably. In looking at this is something we've discussed. I think it's attributed to a lag in some of our grant funding for specifically for the STEP patrols, which I think will resume next month. So hopefully we'll see those numbers come back up.
Questions? The fleet report.
So the three new cars are in. one of which is being outfitted at Ospey Mountain Electronics, with the other two scheduled to be there shortly, so hopefully that transition will be completed in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Criminal Investigative Unit Statistics, Lieutenant Butler.
I would just say if there's any questions on it. It's, we haven't had a chance to update the form. I know Commissioner Tyra had asked. With the large scale, I haven't had a chance to even spend 5 minutes with the chief. We've been a little busy. But we did try to add it. If you notice at the bottom, it says grand jury hours preparation. For instance, tomorrow is grand jury day. Ben's at training. There's 2, hopefully 3 detectives. There's 48 defendants getting indicted tomorrow. It's a lot of work to prep those cases to ensure there's PC for an indictment. So that takes up a lot of time. But yes.
I noticed there's, on the sex offenders registrations, I noticed that's up quite a bit compared to last year.
Some of that is, there's some changes in the sex offender laws. Some people have been upgraded or downgraded from, tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3. So some became 4 times a year now, as opposed to twice a year. So that's a change. You're gonna see an increase, and it'll level off eventually once we catch up. We have taken on several additional people that live here that are 4 times a year.
So it doesn't necessarily mean there are more sex offenders moving to Laconia?
No, they change. It stays right around the same number, and I think it's mid-70s is what the last time I asked Jeff, full-time. And then sometimes you get some seasonal people that come up for, a month or a couple of weeks or something, and they register.
I see the.
It stays pretty consistent.
So does one of your unit members handle these registrations?
Yep. We all fill in, like I did it for years. And then when I got promoted to Sergeant, Jeff Wally took over, and he pretty much is the manager of the sex offenders. We all help out if he can't do it. He does the vast majority, though.
So can you just give us a quick overview of what happens when they check in with the PD?
Yep, they come in, they have to come in, they make an appointment. They can't just show up because we have too many. Some days Jeff will have as many as 5 or 6 in one day. They get brought into the booking room, photographed. If it's their first time registering, the DNA sample's taken, fingerprints through live scan are taken, and a booking photograph is taken, so we have their photograph on file. That gets submitted to the New Hampshire State Police Sex Offender Registry each time they're registered, a photo. Sometimes they'll grow a beard, glasses, they look different, so that there's constantly an updated photograph. He reads the form, Jeff does verbatim, and they have to initial each of their requirements that they fall under the registration. He reads it verbatim. It probably takes him, I'd say half an hour, 40 minutes each.
For each person.
For each one, yeah. He's done as many as 6 or 8 in a day. So it's quite a bit.
Is it, if every PD has the same requirement?
No, some PDs, and it's a problem, is that some PDs, the person just walks in off the street and anyone does the registration, so there's no ownership in it. They're just gonna go, yeah, check the boxes,
Yeah.
whatever, on to the next call. And unfortunately, that results in a lot of errors. So people living somewhere where the form says they live, but they actually don't live there and never did. So we get those occasionally where someone will move from another town or city and the form was incorrectly filled out. Or sometimes they're pre-released from prison. They might be pre-released from prison 3 weeks before they're actually released. So as far as we know, they're living in Laconia when they're not. They're still in prison. They haven't even been released yet. So there's some issues that Jeff is very good with following up on, and the SOR is a simple phone call away. And we always have had a very good rapport on this. I don't think there's ever an error on our part.
So are you doing more than the law allows, requires,
Nope.
or just?
We're doing what the law
just what the
requires. We're not
statute
cutting
requires.
any corners at all.
Yeah,
So
No,
the
it
law
doesn't sound
doesn't,
like it.
yeah, the law doesn't require a photograph each and every registration unless there's a change in appearance. But for our own stats and our own records, the
Sure.
more photos we have, the
No,
better.
it's good.
So we just take one, it takes minutes, it doesn't take long, so.
Frank, had a question?
Yeah, on the Knox and Talks there, I see that's increased quite considerably.
Yes, and that's Dan, like last month it was down because Dan was away
Yeah.
pretty much the whole month. So he's back and he's back doing that.
Back to the sex offenders for a minute. What's the procedure if someone does not register? fails to register.
Yep, they have within 5 days. If they don't register within 5 days, Jeff has a good enough rapport with these people that we are supposed to have a legitimate phone number to reach them. If not, he'll go physically knock on the door. If they're not there, warrant can be issued for their arrest. First offense is a B felony, if it's knowingly. Depends on the circumstance. Some of them are learning disabled, whatever. It's just a mistake. They just forgot. It's a harmless error. He'll give them a warning. There's no set rule that we have to arrest them. We can charge them either negligently or knowingly. So it's not uncommon, as Jim can attest to, is if it's an error and they've done it over and all right, they're just not getting it, they can have a warrant issued for a misdemeanor as opposed to a felony. So it does graduate. If you get convicted of a felony offense once, the second one is a Class A felony. Whereas the misdemeanor isn't considered a first offense, it's basically a slap on the wrist. So if they do it again, or they knowingly do it, they'd be charged with a B felony. And then that would graduate. Is that confusing?
Yeah, if someone
it is a
from
little
another
bit confusing.
community,
Yep.
moves to Laconia, will that other PD, will they sometimes contact you and
Yes,
say, hey, be on
they
the
always
lookout for?
will, always.
Always do.
And if the other department does it, the SOR will. The sex offender registry will get it. And we require, which is kind of above the law a little bit, but it's a voluntary thing on their part. If someone's moving into the city, we'd rather know they're moving in than they're moving out. If they're moving out, whatever. You wanna know if they're moving in, but the way the law's written, you only have to register moving out of the city and town, not into. So you have to register with us if they move here the next time that they're required to register, which could be 6 months, could be 3 months, which is obviously a problem. And the legislature knows about it. It's just a matter of getting that changed, but, so we typically will get that form. Jeff will contact them and say, hey, if you don't mind, and they can say no, I'll come down the next time, fine. I don't think he's ever had somebody refuse that. And we just start the file, get their picture, now we know who they are, we know what they look like, we know what they drive, that kind of thing, even prior to their next required registration. So he's very much on top of it, so.
Thank you.
Traffic statistics, Chief Canfield?
So during the month of September, we had 51 total motor vehicle accidents. Oh, I'm sorry, 49 total motor vehicle accidents for the month of September. As compared to September last year, 54, and then August of 2018 was 51. And that's it.
Questions?
I
Frank?
got a question on that. Driver inattention, distraction, did you find out what that is? If it's use of the telephone or something like that?
It could be a number of different things. Driver inattention could just be that they, nodded off the wheel. It could be that they weren't paying attention, they were distracted, they were looking at the center console. It could be a number of different things.
The reason why I ask is because I see a lot of them making a left turn with the telephone in their rear.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, the hands-free law, when that went into effect, we saw a huge decline in that.
Yeah.
And now it's back up there, and it's certainly one of the goals of the step patrols is seeing that, because you drive around, you see people talking on their cell phones all the time.
Yeah.
Moving on, budget printout, you've already addressed that, Chief, so.
Yes, sir.
We're in good shape. Correspondence to and from the department.
We had a nice thank you letter, working on a case with the county attorney's office. They sent a nice thank you letter, and that was it.
And the performance assessment report cards.
We had a total of 5 that were received. They were all A's with the exception of 1, which had some poor marks on it. I tried to call this person, and I had no return phone call, so I'm not really sure what the issue was with it, but.
Is
other
that
than
an
the fact
accident,
that-
chief, or
Yes. I
car
believe it was.
accident related?
Yep, and I think she was not pleased that someone wasn't issued a summons, so. But
Seems that.
she didn't want to talk to me about it.
All right, overdose statistics.
So for the month of, or year-to-date, for 2018, we've had a total of 75 overdoses, 8 of which were fatal for the year. Last year, we experienced 9 fatal overdoses for the entire year. This year, we're at 8, with 2 months remaining. Our total overdose calls are down slightly. In 2017, we had a total of 146 for the year, and we're at 75 year-to-date now, so.
Just a couple of comments, Chief. Actually, I read the story in the Sun today, and so I know that we have our monthly statistics here, so I was looking at what the article said, and then looking at our numbers, and there was some disparity. I understand they may be counting, the fire department may be counting these incidents that they respond to in a different way. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean.
There was a lot, for example, thus far in 2018, we're showing, we've had 75 overdoses up until the end of September. And yet they were showing, in the chart today I saw in the paper, they were showing 43.
Yep.
So I don't know, I'm just trying to.
Was that for Narcan, though, in the paper?
Yeah, you know,
I'm trying to figure out, how are
So-
they counting, you know how they're counting that 43?
well, it is a difference in reporting methods. Ours are total overdoses. Theirs was reporting just Narcan administration.
Okay.
Aside from that, we have a different picture because we see every single overdose, we see every single overdose death. They don't unless an ambulance is called to it. So if we go to somebody's house and the person has already left and is gone by private vehicle to the hospital, if the ambulance doesn't get called, that's not reporting their stats. They are in ours because we responded to the house, and we would follow up with it at the hospital. The same thing with the overdose deaths. I think in that article, they reported that there was 4, there's actually 8. But again, their stats aren't the same because we might go to an overdose death where someone's obviously been deceased for several days. The ambulance never gets called to it. We get called to and deal with it. So that's why our stats are probably a little bit more, I guess, accurate.
And I don't know if the article was just limited to opioids and Narcan, or, because I know they mentioned Narcan in the article. I don't know if it was limited, because there are other overdoses, you know, from medications, from methamphetamines. So we just don't see opioid overdoses, but they are the predominant, so that might be too. They might be,
Yeah.
just as the question was asked, how many Narcans did you administer, and how many, but there's other medications that are given to non-opioid overdoses, I'm sure.
It's a little confusing, though, for the average reader, because some persons, I guess, could be administered multiple doses of Narcan for the same situation. Anyway, thanks for clarifying that.
Yep, certainly.
number.
I mean, certainly, I think the trend is that we're seeing less heroin overdoses laced with fentanyl. I think we're seeing a lot more meth, not only in Laconia, but statewide and also nationwide. There's a lot more meth use versus heroin use, so.
No medication for that.
There isn't. I mean, we won't see the overdose deaths from methamphetamine as much, although we did see one this year, which is the first methamphetamine death that I've seen ever.
Because it wasn't technically an it was oddly written, and it's the first one I've ever seen in YouTube,
Yeah.
Chief. Just the way it was written, it said cause of death, overdose methamphetamine, and then it said secondary cause of death. He only had 10% use of his heart. So clearly there was other issues, but if he didn't take the meth, they were saying he wouldn't have died that day.
I
Died
mean,
tomorrow, but he wouldn't have died
yeah.
that day.
Certainly, the meth, you don't see the overdoses like you do with the heroin, where it's laced with fentanyl, because it's usually the fentanyl that is the cause of death. It's not the heroin. But I don't think that's necessarily a good trend, because typically the meth is people who become violent and they commit crimes. That's typically what you see with that, versus the heroin is kind of a different state of mind.
Make a wish.
Yeah, so the other Saturday morning, we did a Make-A-Wish escort for a 3-year-old boy who was actually a Guilford boy, 3 years old. He was born with a congenital heart condition with a hole in his heart, spinal bifida, so his spine had some issues with it. Poor kid had 23 surgeries in his short little 3 years of life. So this was, we definitely support Make-A-Wish a lot. I came in for this at 2 o'clock in the morning. They picked him up at his house with a limo, at 4:30 in the morning, and we did a full escort down to the Manchester airport, so he could go to Disney with his family, so very, very cool.
That's the kind of thing that should be in the paper.
Yeah,
You
it
know?
definitely should be, yeah.
Should be.
Good article.
Yeah, I can send that to
Yeah.
him.
You know,
Nice.
Good idea.
And moving on to the full-scale exercise.
So Saturday, we conducted the full-scale exercise at the Laconia Middle School. This was a culmination of, well, I guess it's been a 2-year training program, but specifically a year that we've worked up to this exercise, conducting individual training for officers. We did a full tabletop exercise for command and control of the incident, and then this full-scale exercise simulating 3 different scenarios involving an active shooter at the middle school. Certainly, we use the schools because that's the way we want the familiarity of officers to be, but the techniques and the training that was received out of this could be used in any type of active shooter incident anywhere. It was conducted with all of our law enforcement and emergency responder partners. So we had representatives from a good portion of the other agencies throughout the county. From police agencies, we incorporated the fire department into it. We incorporated the school department into it. But certainly very appreciative of the funding that we received to conduct this through Homeland Security. And the takeaways that we got from this, I think, are by far very, very good stuff that we'll look at and improve upon once we get the after-action report. I think our goal is to look at doing another one of these next year if we can secure the funding. Specifically, want to thank Lieutenant Butler because putting these things together and coordinating, what do we have, 85 people there, 80 people?
I think it was about, well, there was a few, so 65-ish, I think, not including fire. So including fire, yeah, we were, add another 18 or 20 to that, so close to 100, a little less than 100. And then
just-
school.
Yeah, just coordinating and the actual exercise itself, working with all the various agencies to make it happen, and then obviously all the grant support and planning that leads up to it. Just a tremendous amount of work, but certainly at the forefront of training, and some very, very good stuff was received out of it, so.
I'd like to say something on that. I think it was very, very good, and one of the most important things of that whole Sereno was when I walked up, I had to be searched. They had a pocket knife in my pocket, and they took it and put it in a bag and everything, and they searched me and everything, and they said, okay, you're ready to go, Commissioner. So I went in, and I walked around and talked to different ones in the agencies and stuff, and I really was impressed of the whole situation, and I think you did a real fine, excellent job setting that whole thing up.
Tom Sweat had a big hand in it as well. He's not here, but he was a huge part of it also.
Moving on to old business. Chief, anything?
I just have one more thing as far as school safety goes, is that I've been working with Laconia Schools as far as the ALICE training, which is kind of a new topic as far as, instead of doing the lockdowns in the schools, they moved to this program called ALICE. It's a lockdown inform and basically empowering students and staff members to take action. What we saw in Newtown was that students and faculty just stayed in their classrooms, they didn't move, and for lack of other terms, they were just waited to be executed. This allows them to take other measures to maybe, if the shooter's at the other end of the building, to make that decision to leave, to get out of there, to counter if possible. So I've been working with them on this. We did 2 informational nights over the last couple days. We did one at the middle school, one at the Woodland Heights Elementary School. We had a bunch of parents that were at both of them and answered their questions. So I think there's a few more of them scheduled, but just really good partnerships between all the agencies in Laconia. I think it's something to be really proud of here in Laconia because it's not seen as tightly knit as we have in here in Laconia. So it's good stuff.
I was curious if the PD, and you in particular, Chief, or maybe you, Lieutenant, had the ability to receive information about previous actual incidents that have occurred around the country in terms of what went well and what didn't go well, and what were some of the lessons learned and some of the takeaways that, are you able to get that information when you plan these training things and
We are,
see
yeah.
any of those things that weren't done correctly or properly?
Yeah, certainly, I get all the after-action reports from, well, majority of the active shooter incidents across the country. I think there was 36 of them last year. And I certainly, I read most of those. And I think that our goal, my goal for next year, for when we do this full-scale exercise, would be to take the actual fact patterns from a school shooting like what happened in Parkland in South Florida, to take that exact incident and model our full-scale exercise after it. Because I'd like to incorporate some of the school stuff into it. They've done a lot of security upgrades. They've integrated this Alice training, run it the full gamut into that and put it into that exact scenario. So yes, we do.
Good.
Now on to old business. Anything, Chief?
Just an update on the evidence, the outer evidence remodel. We're still continuing to work on that. We have the drying rack, and that should be in place hopefully this Saturday. Dennis Ashley's gonna come in and work on that with me, so hopefully we'll be wrapping that up pretty soon.
New business.
Nothing.
Confirmation of the next meeting date, November 21st. Any issues? Okay.
No.
Other business, Chief?
Nothing.
Can we citizens' comments?
My name is Dennis Lentz. I'm a resident of Laconia. I'd like to speak not only to the civilians, but to the military personnel that are here. There's actually 4 on this panel and 2 right here. Back in the days when I was a medic in the Army, I had to do the phlebotomy to do the discharge physicals for a lot of the junkies. The military got rid of these people basically because they were unreliable, not trustworthy, just a myriad of events that they just couldn't use them. What my question is, why does the police department use these kind of people as their sole source of information? As I wrote in my notice to respond, I firmly believe that this is the reason why the crime rate has risen in this area, is because no one pays attention to the people who actually try to come forward and prove and even demonstrate what has happened here. But it's a question, you know, why does the police department totally rely on these kind of people for their absolute information? On the light side, let me just say, 2 months ago, I turned in an 8x10 full-color glossy photo with circles and arrows and a paragraph on the back by Arlo Guthrie. Did you all get a chance to see that? It's just another document that disappears. All right, thank you.
Is there a need for a non-public?
There is not.
There is not. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
Motion made by Commissioner Tar, seconded by Commissioner Mello. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjournment time at 3:37. Yeah, I wondered. I think that's the new. I think that's the new. Oh, going to, oh.